door. After having a decent match, he says, with a relatively new arrival named Skinner, on a one-time only pay-per-view called Tuesday Night in Texas, I zipped over to the airport and rented a Mustang convertible to pick up Owen, who'd flown in from Germany. I'd suggested to Vince that he could team Owen and Jim and call them the New Hart Foundation, and Vince had gone for it straight away. I was in a great mood as I pulled out of the terminal and spotted him waiting for me curbside with a big smile. I hadn't seen him for just over a year. Most of the wrestlers were meeting at a strip bar. We've got good memories of that now, Matt. Need any more of that in this, but this would be one of the big hangouts in San Antonio whenever the boys would go there. As we drove over there, Owen told me that things had gone well for him in Germany, and that Martha, which of course was Owen's wife, was expecting their first child in March. He was happy to be back in the WWF and said he thought he could work well with Jim. I told him Jim was thrilled about it too. Jim was thrilled in general. He had finally won his settlement from a US airline, a whopping £380,000 that Jim Neidhart won, by the way, in that settlement. So that done him well, didn't it, for a little bit? Owen asked,
money today.
Yeah, it is. Owen asked me for advice on how to handle Jim. And I told him that I tried just about everything. But that in the end it was sort of a thing that no one could handle him. He shook his head, and as I told him me and how unbelievably over I was in Germany, I couldn't believe that fans in Germany were really liking me, and Owen said that they were already chanting Bret during Owen's matches. So it just goes to show how big Bret was becoming overseas there, Matt, I suppose, in many ways. And we've got a great story here about all this as well, about this whole strip club scenario, Matt. And I think Bret mentioned this in his Hall of Fame speech, but I'll read it from the book as well for anybody that hasn't heard it. But Vince came in around midnight. That was unusual because Vince didn't make a habit of hanging out with the boys. But what really turned heads was that Vince was, as Bret puts it, shit-faced. His tie hanging loosely around his neck. Pat Patterson tagged behind him, trying to persuade him to sort of leave and get out of this whole sort of environment. But Vince had decided that he was going to have one last party before the boys, before the whole. And I think this is interesting because this whole night, Matt, this was before the whole business with the steroids allegation, all the rest of it would go on. So I think this was like Vince's way of saying, I'm going to party before all this stuff goes down. Sergeant Slaughter offered to keep an eye on him and act as his sort of designated driver. So Pat fled through the front door as though he'd been chased out by the sight of the naked women that were going to be involved. Then I heard Hogan. Darling, from Hulk, and I wide-eyed Hulk into doing the LOD finish on Vince right there in the bar. Suddenly, Animal crouched behind Vince, stuck his head between Vince's legs, and picked him up off the floor. Vince was laughing as Animal walked him over to all of us. Hulk had already climbed up on the bar, gripping a stripper pole, assuring Hulk that he was going to take Vince's head off. I thought, wow, he's actually going to do it. But at the last second, Hulk thought better of it and leaped off the table, gently hitting Vince with his arm. Hulk and Beefcake caught Vince and set him down on his feet to a round of golf claps from the rest of the boys of what Bret says arse kissers, who seemed to sort of think this was a big deal. I rolled my eyes at Jim, who started to tug on the beard. Jim said to me, the Hart Foundation would have done that and would have the balls to do it. But then Jim says, damn right. I had a beer in one hand and a shot of JD in the other. But the conscious enough to think, my God, what did I just say? Owen's eyes got big. I considered running out the door of this place as I watched the determined Jim come up behind Vince McMahon, grinning at Vince as he was doing it. Vince looked at him jokingly, hugging him. The boys parted before me, and Hulk stared as if this was actually going to happen, and Hulk looking at me as if I had the balls to do it. I set my drinks down, and before I could even think about it, I leapt off a high in the air, clotheslining Vince with a thunderously clothesline, and bounced his head off. That's what puts it here. Bounced his head off the floor. His skinny neck stretched out like a turtle's, he says. There we both were, lying on our backs, and I thought, what have I just done? Vince said, you owe me a drink, Hitman. Vince drunkenly slurred, and Bret says, don't worry, I'm buying. And then Vince says, double. And we tossed them down. So interesting night that must have been, Matt, for everyone in that strip joint, I guess, if you were Vince McMahon. But takes a lot of balls, I guess, there, Matt, if you want to do that to arguably the kingpin of wrestling at that time. But a funny story nonetheless. And yeah, you can hear that as well. You can hear that in his speech. But Matt, I'm guessing there weren't too many guys that would have probably done that at that point. Now, whether that was down to Vince being totally out of it and sloshed, who knows? But I'm guessing that might have gone the wrong way as well.
I'm pretty glad that Hulk thought better of it. I mean, that's a notoriously difficult bump to take, that one. Could have resulted in a broken neck if done wrong.
Yeah, definitely was. No doubt about that. Yeah, very interesting times. Okay, well, I want to move on now to this a little bit more, because we're going to hit on December 23rd. This is the Sacramento House show, and 3,500 here as we see Hart beat the Mountie via submission. So he's still doing a lot of matches here with the Mountie on those circuits, and also he would also face Ted DiBiase at Madison Square Garden show on the 29th of the 12th. Just after Christmas right there, folks, in a match that went just under 20 minutes. This match got a really, really good review. Now, I can imagine Ted DiBiase and Bret being a good match, quite frankly, so that doesn't surprise me. Now, want to just hit up on another part of the book here. Bret says, on December 30th, Roddy pulled me aside at the building that I was wrestling at, and he said, I've got some big news. Vince has told him that I'd be losing the Intercontinental belt to Jacques Rougeau, who has cartooned now. Of course, that is the Mountie at this point, which is, you know, again, Matt, when you think of like wrestlers, you know, I know we've always spoke about this when these great names come in, but they have to play, of course, the Mountie. It's unbelievable, isn't it, when you think of his pedigree and background as Jacques Rougeau? But there you go. He had to be a little bit more. But anyway, Roddy goes on to say that he'd be losing into the Mountie, and basically, which grabbed a few headlines across Canada. Bret says that if this was going to happen because of the whole Mountie gimmick, my heart sank, says Bret, into a pit of my own stomach as Roddy explained that the whole angle. I supposedly come down with the flu, and despite sort of gingerly trying to defend my IC belt against the Mountie, he'd beat me for it. Then Roddy would fill in for me 2 days later at the Royal Rumble, challenging the Mountie to the Intercontinental title match, and Roddy would win. After that, he'd drop the IC title belt to me at WrestleRMania 8. Roddy said he was giving me the advance warnings so I'd be prepared when Vince told me at the next TV tapings. I said yes, I was in one case losing the belt, but if Roddy put me over at WrestleMania 8, it would be the biggest thing to ever happen to me. Matt, of course, this is like, I mean, we're not even in 92 here. They're discussing this right at the back end of 91. But the fact that, you know, he gets pulled aside, that Roddy's going to do this, obviously, as he said, his heart did sink. You know, I guess it would sink if you knew you were going to lose to the Mountie after you beat him so many times on these house shows, and you know it's not the sort of guy you want to lose to. But when you get told that, how big of a deal is that? Was that? I mean, I guess that is a major step up, Matt, for Bret. Even maybe, definitely even a little bit bigger than Kurt, just in the sense that Roddy Piper was such a big name, and also had never ever. I mean, if you look at Roddy's career, had never been pinned in the WWF. Like, this guy went through all this time not being pinned. How big of a deal must that have been for him to hear that, Matt? And also, I get the feeling like Roddy Piper saw something in Bret even then, that this could be the guy to carry on things.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely remember this kind of feud, and especially even like the old promos they used to give each other, and especially when Piper would be like, you know, I used to bounce you on my knee when you're just a kid. It kind of did give me that kind of feeling that, you know, he did have a kind of personal tie to him, and even one where like it may have been that he wanted him to succeed, and you know. Back then, wrestling was a family kind of thing, you know, that you would get into it, and if you had kids, then you'd want them to get into it. So, yeah, it didn't really surprise me that they would end up working together, and that Piper would actually see the talent that is in him, because it was like blatantly obvious to anyone that would actually see it beyond like his size. So the fact that they were going to work together and actually get some decent matches, and you know, actually, and the fact you said that he wasn't pinned up until this point, you know, and that was all at stake. It just made the match mean that much more as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Fun fact here: the newcomers for WWF are Tatanka, played by Chris Chavis, as a babyface who will start on television, and also Papa Shango, Charles Wright, will be debuting. Again, two other sort of gimmicky type characters, I guess, there, Matt. But, you know, Papa Shango and Tatanka, quite relatively well-known, popular guys as well, weren't they, back then? I guess they would go on to be like, they're very iconic now. When you look back at them, everybody kind of knows who they are. You remember all the figures and all the rest of it. And Tatanka especially, you seem to always have that sort of big sort of reaction to the fans, didn't they, when he came out?
Yeah, I remember like in one of our retrospectives beforehand, we did the match with Tatanka versus Lex Luger.
Sure.
When both of them, were undefeated at the time, and you know, I just couldn't believe just how incredible them two guys were as workers back then. A lot of the time I just overlooked them as mid-carders and stuff, and later on in their career, like Tonga especially, become like more like jobber material. But back then, when they were fresh and still hungry for the business, I felt like they were such great talents there, and you know, there was no limits to what they could have achieved. It's just sometimes it's a shame when you're someone like Tonga, when you're labelled with that kind of gimmick. Sure.
Okay, well, it's worth pointing out here that as we hit January, sort of just before the Royal Rumble, and it goes literally as Bret's story of Roddy telling him, but Meltzer writes, one of the strangest stories this past week involves the Intercontinental title. Officially, as the storyline goes, Bret Hart went in the ring with 104-degree fever on Friday night. in Springfield and lost the title to the Mountie. Mountie, in turn, dropped the title at the Royal